Hello, welcome to my channel. This little plant is an African violet called Anthoflores little Axel. The Anthoflores violets are hybridized by Harster greenhouses located in Ontario, Canada. Harster greenhouses were established by Andre Harster in 1976. I will include a link to the company's website in the description box under this video. I received this plant from Bloom Lovers in Canada in September of 2019. Anthoflores little Axel is a miniature variety with medium green plain foliage. Miniature African violets grow up to 6 inches in the diameter of the rosette. At this point, my plant has grown up to 4 inches across and recently started to bloom. It is currently grown in a 2-inch size pot. So it's a very small plant. And you can see the plain green leaves. Choosing the right pot size for planting the young African violet plant is very important, especially for miniature varieties. For regular standard varieties, the size of the pot should be 1/3 of the size of the crown or the diameter of the rosette. For miniature varieties, the size of the pot should not exceed 2 or 2.5 inches in diameter. When an African violet is overpotted or potted in a significantly larger size pot than the 1/3 of the size of its crown, it becomes root bound, or it starts growing roots all the way until they fill up the entire pot, and only then starts blooming. In this particular case, you see that because it was planted in a 2-inch pot, it started blooming very soon. And now, yes, it was potted on the 30th of September, and now we're at the end of December, and it has already produced such a full head of blooms, which look very, very pretty. The blooms of this variety are described as single white pansies with blue thumbprint markings. The fully open blooms measure about 1.5 inches in diameter, and here they are in comparison to a dime coin. This is the only variety that I have that has thumbprint style blooms, and I found them very attractive. The first bloom that opened, I believe, was almost entirely blue in color. And then as it started cooling down, I started seeing more and more white on each of the blooms. It's very bright, very crisp look. The combination of blue and white creates a very clean and crisp look. I really enjoy it. I also enjoy the tall bloom stalks that this variety has. They elevate the blooms above the rosette, and it looks very, very appealing in this plant. And each bloom stalk produces a lot of flowers. Like this particular one bloom stalk has almost 11 buds or flowers on a single stalk. So it is a prolific bloomer. I highly recommend this plant, especially for the beginners who want to start growing miniature African violets. This variety is growing under a combination of LED and natural light on my west-facing window, and with the temperatures in my growing conditions range from 65 to 79 degrees Fahrenheit. Right now we are at 68 degrees Fahrenheit, and the humidity is now a little lower than 50% that I normally try to maintain. So I might, oh, now it jumped back to 48%. How interesting. So I might try to run the warm mist humidifier to elevate it a little further up to 50%. Because I run the humidifier, I always run the fan while running the humidifier to make sure that my plants are protected from the powdery mildew. And sometimes I use fungicide, the garden safe organic fungicide, to make sure that we don't have the powdery mildew on the plants in my house. This is the variety of the fungicide that I use. It's for organic gardening, and I bought mine at Lowe's, but I imagine you can buy it at any garden store. It's garden safe. It's called Fungicide 3, and it has 3 garden products in one. Fungicide that controls black spot, rust, and powdery mildew. Insecticide that controls not all of the insects but some of them, such as aphids, whiteflies, and other listed insect pests, and they're listed here on this brochure on the back of the bottle that opens up, and you can read a list of all insects that it controls, and I use it all the time on my new plants. It controls mites, including spider mites, which is very important as a preventative, to make sure that your plant doesn't have, the new plant doesn't have mites. So if it does have that, I always treat my new plants with this. And a third product that it has is Meticide. It controls spider mites and other mites. And so it also can be used on roses and flowers, but in particular, in my case, I use it on my house plants and the violets in particular, such as this. I grow it on a wick, like all of my other plants. In the wicking water, I use the wicking liquid. I use regular water, tap water that I let stand for a couple of days in open reservoirs to make sure that if it has any chlorine, it has some time to evaporate. And I also add a week dose of this fertilizer about which I learned on my Facebook group, African Violet Nerds. This is a nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium ratio of 795. In the warmer months, I use 1/4 teaspoon per gallon, and in the cold weather and in really hot weather, I use half of this dosage. So instead of 1/4 of the teaspoon, I use 1/8 of a teaspoon per gallon, because as I learned, the plants slow down their growth in the winter during cold temperatures and during really hot temperatures in the summer. And I don't know if this plant is slowing down its growth. It looks like it just wants to bloom all the time. So I will keep watching it, and I might just stop fertilizing it altogether and disbud it to give it some rest once these first blooms fade away. In the meantime, here it is again, Anthoflores Little Axel by Harster Greenhouses. I hope you enjoyed this little plant. It's a miniature and it's lovely, and I highly recommend it. I love this variety very much, and I plan on keeping it in my collection. Thank you all so very much for watching, and if you like this video and would like to stay tuned for future videos, please subscribe to my channel and give it a thumbs up, and I will see you again on the next episode of my African Violet reviews.